Welcome to our latest Monday lecture. We have a guest from Berlin, and that's Thomas Stellmach. And Thomas is an architect and urban planner, and was educated in Berlin and Barcelona. And he is one of the founding members of the office Uberbau, which is based in Berlin. And they're focusing more or less, it's the office that focuses on the kind of strategic urban planning, but the focus of more formative aspects of this. So let's say how the world is somehow dealing with these permanent transformations. And maybe a little bit about what he has done so far. He has taught at the Berlage Institute in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Also, he has taught in Aleppo for quite a while, and now in Moscow in the Strelka Institute. Among others, also he was in Beirut and Barcelona again. Currently, his latest job is working, consulting for the Green Habitat, coordinating pilot projects in terms of also on the level of planning in Philippines, Rwanda, and in Mozambique. And I think I hope I didn't say anything. So, welcome. We're looking forward to it.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for coming. And hello, everybody. Yeah, the darker is better, even if we are the danger that we fall asleep after lunch. The lecture today, or the talk, is called Reality Bites, because Franziska and the team asked me to not only talk about projects themselves, but rather also what are the difficulties in the different cultural contexts, what can happen on the way towards implementation, and how can we deal with that, how can we act, because in fact we could say that planning in a utopian way is very easy. This is, for example, an example from around 1800, when this idea of the utopian city, how society could live perfectly, was very dominant. But later, when these plans were implemented, they often failed in catastrophic ways. Either they couldn't be built, or the people didn't live properly, or they were supposed to be. And this is maybe what we should address now, or what we should discuss today. Of course, you also please feel free to ask questions. Okay, we know more or less, some of you, depending what your background is, how to maybe draw a nice plan, but the actual challenges and difficulties come later. How to build it, who pays it, who controls it, who manages, who finances it, and who actually leads, who takes the initiative. So this is what it is about. Interesting. So I would like to talk today about a few different things, about trends and challenges that we face in that rapidly urbanizing and transforming world. I would like to talk about the process of implementing projects, and of course use a few of my own projects as examples at different scales. I thought of them from large to more of a neighborhood scale. And in each of the scales, we again face different challenges and different answers. For example, on the regional scale, it is, I would say, also very much about cooperation and networks of different communities and cities. On the city scale, maybe the terms connectivity, integration, compactness are important. And then we can also talk about the more local scale and how to deal with these transforming aspects there. I was already introduced. This is a little map where Uberbau has been involved in projects in the last couple of years. You notice that it's kind of a global map, but the US and South America are largely absent, because this is the part, not only coincidentally, where we've been involved in projects, but this is also the part of the world that actually interests us. There's definitely a shift towards the south, and towards the east, away from Europe. And this is certainly also because there a more rapid transformation is happening at the moment, and there also the more important urban challenges are, existing. This is what we are facing. So Francisca has explained all that stuff. So this is the same part of the world at night. You know the photo, of course, maybe easier to see on the screen if you look there. It's quite interesting because it doesn't only show where people live, but also it shows where people actually consume energy at night, have electrical light. So it shows the big agglomerations, but it also shows clearly which areas of the world are more developed. And again, from these projects I have highlighted before, I picked a few to talk about, mostly about projects because that's what the focus here at IUSD is in Aleppo and to some extent Baghdad. I will compare that a bit with a project that is more the United Nations approach in Kisumu in Kenya, and relate that to some extent back to Germany and show a few slides from the Ruhr area. Maybe if we have time, we can also touch upon projects in the Netherlands, in Russia, and a bit in the Philippines, but we can see if that will work out. So the first part of the talk, the contemporary city, what is happening at the moment. You see these 4 photos here. It's basically one way of how cities developed since the Second World War. And these 4 places are, in this case, from the US, from Mexico, from Bolivia, and from China. But they could be anywhere in the world, because this is the first time where we can see globally a similar model of making a city, of developing a city. This could be also, of course, somewhere in East Africa. It could be somewhere in Russia. It would look very much different. So that is the kind of this sprawl, the residential carpet. The other model we see here, of course, mass-produced high-rise slabs or towers. And this urban model has a certain set of characteristics. That is that the highway is becoming very important. It is the backbone of the city. You need a car. Very large blocks. Of course, zoning laws. Unbalanced densities, very high densities in one area, very low in other areas. And the use of maybe the greenery, not so much as a recreational area, but rather as decoration to kind of give this a frame. There's, of course, one other way of making the city, and this is this one here to the left. And I find this quite interesting because if I would ask you, where would you rather live? On the left side of the highway or on the right side? What would you say?
Not any of them.
Not any of them, fantastic. I'm very happy that you say that, because usually people say, probably right, but I don't know. And then I say exactly that, neither of them. Because neither of them is really a kind of sustainable city model. Here, it's probably very hard if you're here living somewhere to, let's say, buy a bottle of milk at 1 a.m. But I think this would be easily possible on this side. But here, of course, probably you don't have a water tap in your bathroom, and you probably don't even have a bathroom, so there's sanitation and infrastructure problems. But here we have exactly this monofunctional use, which is not really sustainable. And of course, the highway is the thing that is not really connecting them, but in fact separating these 2 sides. So this is basically what is the dominant urban model, and this is what is the challenge that we are facing today and that we are trying to answer. Of course, streets are neglected. Because of that focus on the street, this is a picture. This is a picture from Moscow. Congestion happens. So what we can see is that there is, because of this aggregation of functions, a very high mobility demand, which leads to traffic. This also means that the large urban areas, the large metropolises are continuously growing. There's a very high pressure, which leads to the effect that the land value raises up very much. It becomes very expensive to live in the centers of the metropolitan areas. And of course, there are many other problems. So there's a certain limit of capacity which leads to inequality. again, I've mentioned the land prices, which means you either are able to live in the city and you're privileged, or you live outside in the periphery, and I'm not only talking here about, let's say, less developed countries, but I'm also talking about Europe. You remember probably these pictures from 2005. There were riots in the periphery of Paris, and these riots were actually because the people who lived there were not connected, were not provided with the facilities of the actual city. So it was too difficult to enter the city with public transport. There was very little facilities outside of Paris. So the situation became unbearable and the people reacted accordingly. So, and this is a bit now what is framing the work I'm doing at the moment for UN Habitat. They say because of these issues, we need a new model of urban development. We need to make compact cities, which are not sprawling, as you see on the top. We need an integrated, multifunctional, walkable environment instead of a zoned and socially segregated one. And finally, we need to find new ways of increasing the connectivity and avoid the congestion that we see here. So these are the four things that we at UN Habitat are doing at the moment. We try to address that on a policy level by developing for several countries national urban policies. We try to find, give examples how to extend cities, expand cities in a proper way, and of course also try to provide good quality public space. So even better urban design, that would be. And finally, what is always supporting that is an adequate legal framework and of course a financing plan. Again, if we just make nice plans and we don't know how to pay for them, it is basically useless. And the rules around it also need to accommodate what is what the urban environment should be. We see that again in particular in countries which have high ambitions, but maybe not yet the capacity or the personnel to actually implement these ambitions, that they have very good laws, but often the laws are not being used, or no one controls the development because there's just not enough people. And that in the end means that the law is not good, it's not working, because if the law is in theory fantastic, it doesn't help anybody. This diagram I usually don't need to show to you because you know much more than this already, but I show this usually to explain and say municipalities which don't really have a proper planning process yet, what are the basic steps of planning. So it goes from base data collection and certain expectations of the people there to a kind of vision and analysis phase, and then the actual urban planning, maybe development of certain scenarios, discussing them, reviewing them with the public, which then leads to conceptual and eventual detailed plans. All in theory, in a very linear process, in reality, of course, much more messy and goes back and forth and so on. And then when it's finished, ideally, you look at it and you see what worked well, what went wrong, and then you can iterate again. You go to the start and you make the next better project. It becomes better, ideally. And again, ideally, during all this, there should be a participative process that you involve not only, let's say, political stakeholders, but also the business, the private sector, the academic sector, the communities, and the general public. Maybe to illustrate a bit this UN Habitat approach and the difficulties that we are facing, the first little example from the east of Africa. We are now, here is Kenya, Nairobi here, the capital. This is Lake Victoria, the largest lake in Africa. And I will talk about a project we did in Kisumu here, at this little bay at Lake Victoria. So this was just an exercise that we did in a couple of days while visiting the city. So here you see the bay, you see the city of Kisumu, the airport strip. In the north, some mountains, Here some wetlands. And this is a Schwarzplan, a black and white plan of the built urban structure. And this is a situation that you find all across African cities and the Middle East. It looks a bit different. We find often a planned city core from colonial times. And then around a necklace, a kind of ring or a belt of informal settlements of the unplanned city. You can clearly see the different structures. So this is how the city center would look like. And this is how the surroundings, the informal settlements would look like. What we did here to start a discussion on the future of that environment is to analyze the 5 different typical urban patterns that we found there in Kisumu. And then we try to understand how much of the area is used for roads, how much is open space, and how much is actually built. And you can see that in the planned center we have a ratio of about 30% and 20%, 30% of road surface. This is a very good number according to Ian Hunter principles. Open space 27%, and the built over space informal settlements here. You can see that the space for connectivity for road becomes much less, and the open space becomes more. Of course, the same is true for the kind of, in a very different way, for the neighborhoods which consist rather of large villas. The argumentation here is that in this African context, that to provide basic access to an informal settlement, there needs to be, of course, a kind of infrastructure that allows to enter for cases of emergency, but also transportation and so on. So one thing, I can't explain the full story now because I want to go to the other examples, but one thing that we are trying to do at the moment here in informal settlements is find sensible ways of opening streets in these areas. And of course you can, maybe this is something we can discuss later, how to approach this best, because you can imagine what the challenges are. This is one mapping of the northern part in Kisumu, where you can see the ownership pattern, here the plots, and the actual buildings on top of it. And you can see that it often is not even overlapping, so that the cadastre, it's already a luck that the cadastre exists, is very different from the actual build structure. And if we now are trying to provide access to the people, to provide some infrastructure, it's of course an extremely difficult process to be able to do that, because it needs to be discussed with all the owners. You want to avoid to displace the people somewhere else, but at the same time you try to, of course, to rearrange the plot so that the road becomes possible. And finally, especially if you talk about African cities, you would always be operating in the context where also the municipality cannot afford, for example, to buy all the land, to be able to buy the land of right. So again, there needs to be a process of doing that, a process of negotiation. One tool is, for example, land readjustment, that you would ask the community that each of them provides a certain percentage of the land for the road, and later can, when the plots are rearranged, rebuilt, and actually the value of the plots, even though they are smaller, is increased because now there's access in the road and business starts to function. Very nice. This is a picture of a light tower. Okay. This is now from a completely different context. It is not the one picture I added from the Philippines, where we are also working in this kind of urban development projects, urban development pilot project. And this shows the the other pattern that is very eminent. This is the typical gated community that is popping up everywhere, where we run into very similar problems for very similar reasons. In the end, the municipalities in the Philippines also do not have the money to actually even finance the construction of roads, which means that large chunks of land get the development rights for private developers. And the first thing they do is build a wall around it and make, let's say, the walled garden with infrastructure inside, but only for the selected people. After a while, after about 10 years in the Philippines, one thing happens. The maintenance cost of the road becomes very high because the roads are starting to break down. And at that point, the owner of that development would hand over the roads to the city. So it is a kind of bittersweet deal, because on the one hand, finally the roads become public and everybody can access them, but at the same time, the city has to pay the maintenance of the road. So they take the deal, but continue to stay broke, basically, because they do not capture any of the value that is generated here. It all ends up in the private sector. So this is another venue where we try, as in Habitat, to kind of go in and change the entire system, how this is working, so that a different kind of more sustainable development is possible. And this is why there's these two other maybe layers to the planning diagram. It is not only, of course, about the spatial planning, but exactly the economical system also needs to be understood in the same way. And the legal framework needs to be understood in each of the country, and these three elements need to go together. So talking about cooperation, back to Germany. Half a year ago, we were asked by the rural area. You know it, of course. It's the cluster of 52 towns in the west of, north of here, in the northwest of Germany, which formerly was the economic powerhouse of the nation, and now, because the coal is basically finished, the coal extraction has stopped. The situation is quite similar to Detroit. The economy is completely on the ground, the highest unemployment rates in Germany, and nothing really works. And so we were asked by these 50 municipalities that created a new body of, a new body that asked for support. We were asked to develop a vision how this future of the rural area could look like. And of course, we did all these things that urban planners do, new transport network, using the existing streets, better integration of links. But I don't really want to talk about that now. I rather want to emphasize that also in this case, we proposed a new cooperation model between these 52 municipalities, because at the moment they were mostly working against each other. Each of them wanted to have one opera, or if IKEA wanted to open a new shop there, they were all fighting to get the bid, because they needed the tax revenue, each of the cities, because again they're broke. And so each of them was bidding lower and lower, and so basically IKEA had free choice where to go, just as an example. So again, there needs to be a new model of cooperation, how the different sectors and the different layers operate together for the sustainable development of the area. For that, you can also look at other cities, how they are organized vertically and horizontally. This is work of some colleagues of mine from the Netherlands. And there's also maybe examples where this has failed. For example, a couple of years back, maybe you've heard of it, there was the very prestigious Grand Paris competition, which was a direct initiative by President Sarkozy, where the new regional plan of Paris was supposed to be developed. And a great set of 10 consortiums of famous architects did their proposals. And after they implemented the so-called Atelier Grand Paris, which was a workshop of people where these ideas were supposed, again, in a cooperative, actually quite smart process, to be prepared for implementation. But one thing happened, and this danger is also there for the Ruhrgebiet. This was, let's say, a toothless tiger. It was a very nice place with well-educated intellectuals doing their work, but they had no factual political power. So it was very easy for the politicians, after, let's say, the election period, to completely ignore everything that was being done there. And up until now, hardly anything of that project, despite all the great ideas, has been implemented. And this is the danger that this could happen in the Ruhrgebiet too. So that there's now all these ideas. And again, so you need a very smart process of cooperation between the political will, the academic ideas, and of course the private sector, where eventually the money comes from. 2 or 3 more slides about the Ruhrgebiet. Exactly because of the difficulties in financing the project, we did also not propose a grand project of remodeling everything, but actually a set of 50 little tools or 50 little projects. Also a bit hard to see, maybe the screen is better. Which the cities could use to actually make little acupuncture projects. They were clustered in 3 different categories. One of them was called Zeitstadt, time city, that had to do a lot with efficient mobility, basically not losing time while sitting in the traffic jam, or providing easily, let's say, quickly food from local production to the citizens. The next one was the field city, the Feldstadt, the productive city, to encourage local production of goods. And finally, which is very important in that area, because it is very low-lying, to develop a sustainable water network. These are the blue lines. And by implementing these little tools, they start working together. That the water that needs to be pumped out of the former coal areas can actually be used to water the new, let's say, tomato plants, which again are in the old factory, which is not used anymore because industrial times are over. And then these tomatoes are transported with the new provision and mobility system to the local market. And it all starts to work and create added value in a cheap way. I will skip the plans about that. So these were exemplary plans, exemplary sites, where we explained how these systems work. Maybe to go to the next scale, to the citywide scale. Here I can talk a bit about the project that we did in Aleppo, in Syria. That was, of course, before the crisis. That is already going on for some time. So the ambitions were high, the dreams are big, and of course, at some point, this entire urban development project stopped. It was also an urban vision for the year 2025. I will now present this to you as we presented it before the civil war started. So for those of you who don't know, this is an aerial picture of the city of Aleppo, between 3 and 4 million people. And what is maybe extraordinary is that the boundary of the city is quite clearly defined. There's not much sprawl around, a bit along the main roads. We can also see the new ring roads and the kind of river that crosses the city from north to south. And this is the old ancient city with the Gala, the castle in the middle. The population is growing relatively quickly. In the scope of the project, we had expected an additional 1 million people with a 2.6% growth rate. This is a picture of the citadel in the center. This is a picture of Hayredia, which is one of the informal settlements. It looks from the distance quite nice. If you go inside it, of course, it's not this. It is a light tower inside. It's not that nice. When we did the project, which was in 2008, I think, the city had adopted the Agenda 21 targets, again, of the UN, and there was a very ambitious text that they wanted to promote, of course, a good environment, the economy, good services, and prevent new informal settlements, which they were called in the text illegal settlements, of course. And there was already a master plan, so this is the master plan which was about to be ratified of the city of Aleppo in 2008. And the first thing we did is to look at this plan and see, does the plan which they are developing actually meet the targets which they themselves have written down in their strategic document. And I just want to illustrate a few examples. I cannot present the entire plan. But one thing was, for example, that they promoted, so that they said they would like to reach an economically sustainable, developed society.
Just one question. Who asked you to do it?
That was the GIZ.
Ah, okay. So it didn't come directly from the city?
This is a very good question. It's basically the GIZ paid me, but I reported to the mayor for it.
And he was also, was it of his intention?
Yeah, that's why it's interesting. So that is also why maybe we should keep it short so we can discuss a bit more exactly these things.
Like this plan is prepared by the new inhabitants and then you evaluate the plan?
I need to give more context. First of all, at that time we were relatively lucky with the mayor of Aleppo, which was Imam Shibli, who himself had a background as an urban planner. So he was not a doctor or a businessman, he was an urban planner, so he understood the value of a good plan. But of course he was also in a certain kind of political context where he could not move that freely. And I'm sure I also don't understand everything that is going on, that's sure. Secondly, this plan had been prepared by the city planning team. Urbanization was not involved at all here, forgot to say that. But I was teaching at that moment in Aleppo at the university, planning and design. And they asked me to help with that Cities Alliance and GIZ project to actually make a city development strategy. And so I was asked to make the spatial component of that. But again, as I said before, there was not only the spatial component, but there was also a local economic development program and a program that helped to develop the right legal framework and so on. And so the first thing that we did is not develop yet another plan. The first thing that we did is look at the existing plan to try to understand whether it actually meets their goals in a very basic way. And secondly, of course, there was also an issue of commitment maybe. So the GIZ in this case has always a principle that there needs to be, and that the work should be equally distributed between this foreign consultant who just comes in and flies out and is there shortly. But there also needs to be a local partner who actually works together. That's the theory. There was a local partner, it was quite good people, but still, basically, the work has mostly been done by us. So we would have wished that there's more commitment or more contribution from the locals. And finally, there's certainly a problem here, which again has to do with the, let's say, political commitment. Because that project was, as far as I know, completely funded by GIZ. So the city did not have to give a contribution. The contribution was in kind. It was some rooms in the city hall. And this is also something that, again, as a principle in the UN Habitat work, we also try to avoid. We do that only in the very poor countries, where we actually only just give. In the slightly developing, in the quite developed countries, say Colombia or the Philippines, for example, we would expect a 50% contribution from the local city government or from the national government, because that, again, ensures that you know from the beginning on if there's commitment, because if the people pay for it, you know that they actually want it. Very simple. Like, well, if you You know that from your own private life, I suppose. So we looked at the plan, and you have to know that in Aleppo, the people in the west are the people which are a bit more, that's where the better off live, because the wind comes from the west, the air is better. And in the east, there's rather the poorer areas and the more industrial areas. So when we looked at the plan and looked where actually the urban expansion areas are, we very clearly realized all the city extension is happening in the west. Why would that be? Probably because this is where the land is owned by the people who would actually profit from converting that into urban land, from agricultural land. But of course, all the population growth is happening in the east, because where the families are a bit poorer, usually the households are larger. So actually, more area would be needed here. So a balanced, sustainable, economically developed society, not so much. Another statement from the document was that they would like to organize informal or illegal settlements to service them well and prevent the emergence of new informal settlements. When we looked at their plan, we realized that while Aleppo consists to about 40% of informal settlements, they were not even mapped in the plan, they just did not exist. Which means they're completely ignoring the situation, and even some of the development areas in the east were marked as agricultural or new development areas, while actually there was already a city there, but it was not on the map. So we addressed that, and then instead of making a new or different kind of a master plan, we gave them a set of principles to follow, which hopefully would enable a more strategic development. I, again, will not go through everything, just name 2 or 3 of these rules. The first one was to preserve some of these vast spaces for extension and to develop in phases, not just at once for this 10-year scope, and dedicate all the agricultural land to urban development all at once. So again, we were running the numbers, also quite interesting. We calculated before that the scope of the plan was to provide housing for 1.2 million people. When we actually looked in the plan, we realized that the plan already provided for 2.5 million people, so much more that is needed, and that in a context where actually it would even be unclear that the city would manage to provide enough housing for 1.2 million. So in fact, this would be enough for the expected population growth. So all the other land, again, was probably due to speculation and other reasons. So we said, okay, start with this, do it step by step. You know, don't do everything at once. You can revise later again. Another principle is that we proposed decentralized network of hubs, because at the moment most facilities people are using, also all the most of the administrative facilities are located in the center of the city. So we proposed a network of sub-centers, which of course are where the large infrastructure systems overlap. So a spatial system of decentralization. And then there was yet another component of the plan to increase the airflow in the city and provide more public spaces. On the one hand, by allowing the wind from the west to enter these areas. There are already existing open areas to protect them in the city. And this even started to happen to some extent before the civil war started. We made the proposal to re-naturalize the river, which in the city center was mostly underground in the tube and only came up at a certain point, to give it a soft edge again and maybe even make that the symbolic space where the people from the east of Aleppo and the people of the west of Aleppo can actually meet in a new public space that is for everybody, because there's very little public spaces, in fact, in the city. And finally, of course, provide a network for the neighbors. So in the end, we created this this vision plan, let me call it like this, which has all these layers, all these principles in there. But this was not supposed to be a better master plan. It's not a master plan at all. It was rather a visualization which showed a different approach how to deal with the issues the city has. So this was not yet another legal document, another plan. This was rather a document which then was used to start a strategic process, to have a base of discussion what the future of Aleppo should be about. Because finally, this is what our job is about. In the end, we are supposed to create value for all citizens, and by value I don't only mean economic value, that can also be well-being or health. And that happens by urban design, urban planning, what I'm talking about, but again also by the right regulations and by the right processes. I go a bit faster, I'm sorry. The last scale I would like to discuss with you is more local scale, transforming the existing city, urban renewal, maybe agricultural projects. And I want to show a project that we did in Baghdad. But first, I want to show you a few pictures I took from my hotel room in Baghdad 4 years ago, I think, 3 years ago, which shows you, as we talk more about the process and context here today than about the project itself, it shows you the difficulties that one has to operate in that city because of the security issue. So this is the hotel that we are in, and I don't have a pointer now, but up here you see that there's the access road. Yeah? But you see also that the access road is in fact closed off with the concrete walls at the beginning. So you can't even really get in there, you have to wait, you get checked there, then you enter the road. You can zoom in. Yeah, there you have it. So the entrance is on the other side, you can drive around here. Then in front of the hotel, there's a bit of police and a tank, and this is where you have to step out of your car and your car will be searched. After your car has been searched, you are actually allowed to drive onto the hotel compound, but you can of course not park next to the hotel. You can only park about 80 meters away, because maybe you still have the bomb in your car, even after it has been checked. So you can park there. And then there's another set of concrete walls, quite low, and the gaps are rather small. Well, there's one bigger gap there. That is probably a mistake, because usually you can just squeeze through. You cannot carry something heavy with you. You can just hoist your suitcase over. And then you go to the entrance. Here you have it. Then you go to the, that's not in front of the hotel, but then you would go to the entrance of the hotel. But of course you don't enter the hotel yet, you enter a separate building where your luggage will be searched and you will be searched. And then only after that, you exit that building again and you can enter the hotel. And of course this entire procedure took 40 minutes, and it's not even the airport, it's just a hotel. So, I myself keep forgetting this stuff when I'm back in Berlin and I make a nice plan. And then I make a lot of calls because I don't get an answer from Baghdad, I don't know what is happening with the project, and I get very frustrated. And then I fly there to talk to the clients again, in this case the Mir, the city of Baghdad. And once I'm there, I understand that I don't get any phone calls because I feel again the difficulty, how difficult everything is. Nonetheless, I show you a few pictures from the project. And maybe in the end I can say also, of course, that nothing happened and probably nothing will happen. you're following the news, I assume the situation is getting just more difficult by the hour again. So this is Tigris River. Here in Baghdad, the project was in the north, in an area called Al-Adamiyya, which was a very important Sunni mosque, the Al Hanifa mosque. On the other side of the river is Kadimiyya, which is a very important Shia shrine there. Again, we set out a few targets for the project, what you want to do there. Preservation and dealing with the historic substance was very important, and also maintaining the local traditional communities, while at the same time it's a point of attraction in the city. At least twice a year, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims get there. So that is this area, a waterfront. It's a former Saddam Hussein palace here, the university. Here's the Al Hanifa shrine, and there's the main road going towards the city. So basically what you wanted to do is create also with the bridge to Kadimiyya, to create one strip that is very active for the public, while maintaining the much more intimate traditional neighborhoods which are south and north of it. Again, creating a kind of green network, and then trying to deal with that public-private issue. We also try to deal with the different transport conditions. So this is a new transport network for the area, which is of course also congested, that we try to develop with more one-way streets and using the main square in everyday use, but rerouting the traffic in a different way when it is the point when the pilgrims meet at Al Hanifa Square. And we showed as an example how the design for the square could look like. So in everyday use, it's again very hard to see, I'm sorry. In everyday use, through the careful arrangement of the roads and the palm trees, there would be a set of 5 quite intimate spaces. But the moment the road is closed, this becomes actually one large square that works together for the big events. And also makes the river Tigris, which at the moment is not very accessible because it's well either a 45-degree embankment or a steep embankment, and the tide is can vary very widely, so it's usually very far down the river. With a new waterfront structure, basically stepping down to make this waterfront much more public and more accessible. And we added 2 new buildings to basically frame that square. And made a wonderful new plan. And this is, in fact, I have to criticize my own work here, because on the one hand, we were very excited about all these beautiful ideas we had, and on the other hand, we ignored, and maybe had to ignore, exactly the difficulties that Baghdad is facing. Because we were so far away in Germany, we could not actually work in Baghdad. The security situation did not allow that. We had a very hard time getting information from the area because it's controlled by Sunni militia. You can't even easily get in if you don't know the right people. So in the end, we did a blind project. And of course, until today, nothing has happened, exactly because the conditions were not ready. This was a couple of years ago, maybe today. I would not do it again. I wouldn't do it like this, just to have a plan. I would try to rather, with the locals there, find a way to change the neighborhood. But the plan was not very necessary. Also, maybe as an aside, during the process or after the process, we slowly started to understand what it is about. Because 2 years before, new plan had been published for the Kadimiyya area, which is the Shia area. So probably there was some kind of disbalance or unrest in the population. So the president had to issue also a new public plan for Adamiyya. So this is in fact a media political play to show that the government of Iraq also cares for that Sunni area. And I don't know if there were ever plans to build that. It was more of a game for the public. And now to come to the end, I think it's about time. There is, despite all these difficulties, also a recent tendency, of course, for Europe to actually learn from the, let's say, less organized context in developing countries. This is a picture from Lagos, I think, and you can see again the terrible congestion, but you can also see the vibrancy and the mix of activities in the street. While this here is a picture from the center of Rotterdam, which somehow looks less alive. Maybe it's easier to drive through. You can see that the traffic is clearly organized. That's another picture from Rotterdam. You can see that not like in the first picture everything is mixed, but you have one strip for pedestrians, another strip for bicyclists and motorbikes only, and yet another strip for the cars. It is all clearly organized. So in fact the Dutch government in this case has given us some money that we can research into how making these streets more alive and more mixed again. Basically learning from Lagos if you want, or learning from the other contexts we are working in. And another beautiful example of managing the public space with a lot of poles and security warnings. And so we were trying, and again I don't go into detail, how to introduce this hybridity again in the public spaces in Europe. This was a case where there was a very loud highway with a very dark, dangerous passage underneath, with the building next to it that was empty because no one wanted to live next to the highway. It was too loud. And we found 9 places like this all over the Netherlands to show how they can be transformed. In this case, we proposed that this house not be used anymore for residential use, but for workshops, maybe for bands and artists or for car repair. We proposed to make a public bath, a hammam, which doesn't need light anyhow under the highway, so suddenly it becomes an additional use. So all this gains a bit of the density and the mix that we like so much about some other cities. So to make a city that is basically accessible and walkable and especially there for everybody. Thank you, that's it.